Come on, Rex. Time to move out.
Fives. Echo. Before that, Heavy. There's so many troopers. Gone.
If you've played the Companion's questline or just wandered around Skyrim for any period of time, you have no doubt heard of Ysgramor, an Atmoran hero who led the first humans to settle in Skyrim. Now, he technically didn't establish the country as we know it, since that honour goes to his descendant, Harald, who became Skyrim's first High King. Still, he came from Ysgramor, who led the first immigrants from Atmora to settle in Tamriel, so there's a reason why he's the most revered of probably all the heroes of old. Because he's so old, his lore is more mythical than factual, probably inspired by a lot of Norse myth, and it also illustrates how perception of gods changes over time in Elder Scrolls lore, which is quite realistic actually. Having said that, there's nothing realistic about Ysgramor himself, and while his battle with the Snow Elves is what he's famous for, we're going to start earlier, in his days in Atmora. Now, Ysgramor has had many names, including Ysgramor, Ysgrim, the Harbinger of us all, High King, and Hoary King. Spelt H-O-A-R-Y, before you get any ideas. Before he was called the Invader by elves, Ysgramor was busy getting up to some really strange things. He was born and raised when Atmora wasn't the frozen waste it is today. It was probably a slightly chillier Skyrim, that even had forests, namely the Atmoran Frostwood. Ysgramor was known to hunt here, using his legendary bow, Long Launcher, presumably because it launched arrows a really long way. Yeah, Ysgramor wasn't a creative namer, and he apparently was able to turn concepts into physical objects, at least as far as his bow was concerned. Atmora was home to a lot of giants, and when Ysgramor needed to restring Long Launcher, he took the laments of the giant wives, somehow, and brought them to Froa and Grosta, two members of the Companions, who took the laments and through some reality-defying process, turned them into the woeful bowstring. This bowstring made Long Launcher sentient, sighing when Ysgramor held it and moaned whenever he fired an arrow. What? Anyway, with his new bow upgrade, Ysgramor took to hunting the white stag of Forelgrim. Still, even with his newly buffed weapon, Ysgramor couldn't land a shot on the white stag, due to how quiet and elusive it was. That, and if your bow is busy moaning, stealth archery is probably out of the question. A hare came out of nowhere and told Ysgramor that he knew where the stag was because of his long ears, and that, if our boy Ysgrim had long ears as well, he could also find the stag. So, Ysgramor got magical ear lengthening surgery until a fox came out of nowhere, RKO'd the hare, and revealed himself to be Shor. Shor the fox stated that the hare was Hermamora, or Hermaeus Mora, and that the Daedric prince had tricked Ysgramor into having elf ears. Which, I mean, that's a prank and a half. Shor told Ysgramor not to fall for the tricks of elves, lest he become one, and that he needed to get good and hunt the white stag with what he had. And this is essentially the template for many of Ysgramor's myths, with Hermamora, known as the Woodland Man at the time, being his main antagonist and a Loki-like figure in terms of trickery, which I personally don't associate with the Hermaeus Mora we get in Dragonborn. Sure, he's trying to be tricky, but he's not going around giving people long ears for a laugh. Still, while a lot of Ysgramor's myths apparently follow this formula, there are a lot of other things we need to cover first. One of which is a legend in which Ysgramor spent a day and night wrestling a giant chubloon. Ah, cool. So, Ysgrim here went around wrestling giant beasts, like those crazy Russians practicing grappling with bears. Wait, what is a chubloon anyway? The less said about that the better, I think. We also have the arrival in Skyrim and later the Night of Tears, that led to the war against the Snow Elves. Now I cover this from the Snow Elves' perspective in this video if you want that part of the story in more detail, but I'll give you a quick recap here. Ysgramor, his family, and a bunch of his followers fled Atmora following a civil war that fractured the continent. He arrived and settled in Skyrim, founding Sarthal, while being amicable with the Snow Elves at the start. Then the Night of Tears happened, when the Snow Elves sacked Sarthal and slaughtered its inhabitants. Although we're not 100% sure why. It could have been over the Eye of Magnus, provocations from the Atmorans, or just straight up fear and racism. We don't really know, but Ysgramor and his sons, Ilgar and Ingol, survived, returned to Atmora, gathered the 500 companions, and made the Snow Elves do a white rhino. Ysgramor and his companions then properly populated Skyrim by building cities, and that's pretty much where Ysgramor's story ends. While Ingol and everyone else aboard his ship, the Hierarch, died in a storm, Ilgar later carried on his father's rule. Ysgramor mainly spent this period of his life killing frost giants and building Windhelm, which I also cover in this video. But self-promotion aside, there are still a few odd things we have to go over. For one, we have to mention that, while the modern companions don't like using magic, Ysgramor and his original companions were all for it. The Atmorans love magic, and Ysgrim himself was said to ride upon a Storm Atronach bear, which might be one of the most heavy metal things in Elder Scrolls lore. I mean, look at that thing. Now, Ysgramor was also said to be very intelligent, and after returning to Atmora to get his crew together, he took some time to document all that had happened, inventing a runic alphabet based on Elvish principles to turn Atmoran speech into a written language. This made him the first human historian, although there is some evidence that he might not be human to begin with. Ysgramor is one of the mightiest names among the humans, and embodies the best and worst of humanity. He's powerful, wise, intelligent, clearly believes in the importance of learning, and has a diverse skill set, from being a great warrior to a proficient mage and even a historian. He's also incredibly violent and vengeful, as the Snow Elves can attest to, and far mightier than any man at this time. The only mortals that Ysgramor can really be compared to are the Dragonborns, especially because many sources state that Ysgramor could use the Thu'um. This makes sense because the Thu'um originated from Atmora, and I'm also talking about the Thu'um as a way of war. I'm not talking about the way of the voice, which is pioneered later by Paarthurnax, and we know that non-dragons could use the voice at this time, since Morahouse was from Atmora and he had access to the Thu'um. Still, with the dragon cult also originating from Atmora, there is some interesting stuff about how Ysgramor interacted with the dragons. The most interesting of which states that Ysgramor was a dragon himself. His name, Ysgramor, may have been modelled after dragon naming conventions, and he may even have been called Ysmalethax, the Northerly dragon. Although this is odd considering that Ysgramor is dead while dragons don't age. The more likely situation is that Ysgramor was a dragon priest, hence why he has all that power, with him being called dragon as an honorific title. This makes sense since only the dragons and the dragon priest were said to be able to use the Thu'um in Atmora, and explains why Ysgramor had such authority to begin with. Again, Morahouse is an exception to this because he's a demigod and the son of Kain. Now, if legends are to be believed, he was probably beyond a normal human since Hermaeus Mora had such an interest in him, and when Sarthal burned, he was so grief-stricken that he cried tears of ebony. Ingol was said to be the best smith of his time, and took his father's tears and a raging storm to make his legendary axe, Wuuthrad, meaning storm's tears. Ultimately though, we have to take a lot of what we hear about Ysgramor with a pinch of salt. He's such an old figure, and existed before humans started writing anything down, that his very being is so mythological and legendary. I mean, he was the first guy to write anything down, and a lot of his tales with Herma Mora were probably parables he tried to tell the next generation so that they had stories to learn from. I mean, Hermaeus Mora's characterization in these tales is not really what we see in the Dragonborn DLC. Although to be fair, it has been thousands of years, and Hermaeus Mora could have lost his funny bone since then. What I will say is that he is one of the most interesting figures in all of Elder Scrolls' lore, and shows how different the old Atmorans are compared to the modern Nords of Skyrim. To be honest, they could probably do with a bit of Ysgramor's mindset right now. Respect history and be scholarly, be versed in magic, warfare, and put value on trying to teach others. Of course, the severe elf hatred might be a step too far. Reserve that for the Thalmor specifically. And no one better call Ori a knife here, you hear me? But hopefully you haven't got sick of hearing me and liked this video. Thank you for watching, and maybe I'll see you in another video.
And so the pack was born again, as the wolves of Yarbasker, to rule in life and serve in death, as the moonlight stars.